Okay, now that we have a multi-table query set up, in fact, we've got a couple of them, let's talk about a couple of ways we can clean this up just a little bit and make it a little easier to work with. So let's start with this idea. So we have here we have the country.code and the country.language or country code. Now we can alias tables when we do this in SQL or MySQL. So what I can do is from country C, and then what will happen is it will assign the letter C as the alias for that table. I'm going to do the same thing as country language as L. And so what that does is now if I am doing, when I'm typing this out, I don't have to type in the whole table name. I can just type in the alias. And that's the only place where I'm using those. And so now it's country as C, country language as L, C.code and L.code. And that way I don't have to type in the whole country name in either my select or my where clauses. The other thing I can do is I can get away with taking my little parentheses out. Now, some people like to have those there. In fact, some people put parentheses around every one of these, so it ends up looking like this. Oops. And what that does, if we execute that, it should still work. And what that does is that just kind of, for some people, it helps with the way they read the code. So you may notice that some people, if you're looking at some SQL code, you may see that. In fact, it may even be easier for you. Other people like to leave the parentheses off of these conditions. And in that case, it ends up looking like this. And that's going to function as well. So it's just a matter of what's going to work best for you. Now let's go back to our previous query here where we're selecting country.name. I don't need to use world anymore. So I can do the same thing here. So I'm going to do country as C and city as, let's do T for city. And then now when I type this in, it can be C.capital equals T.it. And then up here, actually, let me go ahead and I'm going to leave this for the moment. So here I have some of these aliased and some of them not aliased. And when I go to execute the query, it's going to say, hey, I don't recognize country.name. So that's a select thing. And so the reason it doesn't is because we've now aliased it as city or country as C. So I'm going to change all of my aliases here. City.population is going to be T.population. And let's execute the query now. And now it's going to work just fine. It's actually interesting, even though we write the select statement, the select clause before the from clause, when SQL evaluates, it evaluates the from clause first, which makes sense, right? It's got to know where to get the data. So if we alias here, in our from clause, and obviously it does that before it aliases or evaluates the where clause. If we do that, go ahead and remove those just so we can have it look that way. We need to do the same thing in the select clause. It won't handle both. But now that I've got it set, it won't handle, let me rephrase that. If I set an alias here, I have to use the alias here. It won't go either or. It won't use either alias or the full name. It will use the new alias. So C and T or whatever you decide for your aliases. Okay, so using aliases gives us the ability to kind of make these a little faster and easier to type up. The downside is, depending on the alias, sometimes it makes it a little harder to read. Like if you don't remember that city was aliased as T, you're wondering what T.name is, T.population is, and T.it is. So it's a little harder sometimes to evaluate, but it's a lot faster to type up if you do the aliases when you initially create the query.